Hello everyone, in video 13 I covered the way the phases of the postmodern age progressed over time and how they explain the problem with the way it's all evolving because of the proportions in which all the periods have evolved over time in general. I also covered the evolutionary principle in the sense of how we can see the societies of the Holocene evolving beyond themselves into the Anthropocene. So that is the pattern that runs through all the periods and how that increases over time. So in this video I can look at what's happening as we only have months to go until we actually enter the Anthropocene. One thing is for sure, history is not a pattern which repeats itself, as the world evolves over time. Every day is different, even though life may seem repetitive to some people or who have a lack of contact with the world at large, but it can appear to be slow moving, as what we have currently is a conflict between long-term economic strategies and our immediate survival needs, which is causing a problematic bubble to form in the environmental issue. In the period which we're about to see, I think we can safely say that these types of issues will be arising faster and more frequently until the environment is something that becomes an ongoing issue which governments and organisations are addressing, which is just about what's happening now. But there's still big gaps in the way that governments are dealing with it around the world. This is going to happen as humanity in general becomes more organised and creates more progress. And this is a trend we can see accelerating since the widespread introduction of computers, and the reason some societies seem to be very slow to evolve appears to be due to a lack of them. And it's got nothing to do with the people there, because I met a lot of them and we're all Homo sapiens. So there you go. We can see much less connection to the internet, access to computers, hence both the lack of access to information, the ability to communicate in developing nations, particularly in Africa and parts of Asia. And these are the places where governments are most unstable and the threat of terrorism is much higher. So we're obviously talking about a problem with the world system here. And what I predict will happen with regard to these societies is that more people will gain access to computers as the world sees the solution to this problem as being linked to the creation of wealth and skilling workforces. Hence, the more people are going to say, we're no longer just going to follow this or that trend, as societies are no longer seen to be simply evolving out of history, and there is more focus on people living in the moment. But the people who are not in contact with the world and don't have access to ideas and can't create their own direction for themselves are still going to be led by people who can get them to do just about anything. This is the shift to the Anthropocene. What I will say is going to stay the same, though, is that we'll still be on the same planet as it was yesterday, and what we do today is going to affect tomorrow. So if we consider the fact that the powers that be know we have a problem with the world system in the sense that it's evolving out of the Holocene, we can see a lot of new methods being introduced in the form of legislation, business processes, especially customer care and government policies relating to the care of citizens, such as laws protecting consumers, the use of data collection, the use of computers, and we can see ourselves shifting from one period to the next. So accountability is the key word in all this, as people in positions of responsibility must show what their options are at the time, why they chose one course of action over others. Because of pressure on resources, both material and human, these people have the job of showing why they are making the best possible decisions. So meanwhile, we have the problems like the Russian-Ukraine war and the new Israel-Palestine conflict. And this appeared in The Guardian recently by Jonathan Yerushalmi and agencies. Tuesday, 5th of December, 2023. Research by law professors Robert Jackson Jr. from New York University and Joshua Mitz of Columbia University found significant short selling of shares leading up to the attacks that triggered the war. Short sellers place bets on shares that expect to fall in price. They pay a fee to borrow shares in a company and then sell them in the hope of buying them back at a lower price and pocketing the profit. Days before the attack, traders appeared to anticipate the events to come, the researchers wrote, citing short selling of an exchange-traded fund that broadly tracks the performance of the Israeli stock exchange that suddenly and significantly spiked on the 2nd of October. And just before the attack, the short selling of Israeli securities on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange increased dramatically. They wrote in their 66-page report, one of the researchers told the Telegraph newspaper that it was not inconceivable the profits from this were above $100 million. So is it now the terror industry? All terror groups need to do now is gather forces for an attack and then make their money back on the falling share prices. So this is a problem which must be cleared up, as it's a clear danger to the public. Additionally, looking at what is happening with the invasion of Gaza, with witnesses reporting to the BBC shooting at the Al-Shifa hospital as Israel says their special forces are searching for an alleged Hamas base. This was on November the 16th, 2023. If the Russian-backed Hamas wanted to cause an overaction in the system, this is it. And it shows that we do have a problem with the world system in terms of the way the world works. If Hamas was advised by Russia on the way the attack on Israel should have been coordinated, because it moves things forward in a way that the UN could never have done. Meanwhile, Biden from the US and Xi Jinping have met from China, vowing to keep talks open, isolating Russia on the war issue. And isn't it convenient how the world has found a way of stabilizing itself and progress occurs once more? However, perhaps we could say these events are World War III, just broken into parts, because the UN Security Council is providing us with a way of solving the problem, and computers are bringing us out the other side. In other words, we can see something is being done at each stage as the world tends to swing out between East and West, but then the Security Council is enabling action to take place which keeps it stable. To be an era that's equal to any other, the postmodern age must change the way the world works entirely, and this hasn't happened yet, as we still need to fully reform the structure of the UN system if we're to change the sort of change in the framework of nations which would actually enable us to pass through this period completely. So the way to achieve this, it seems, would be for people to realise that we need to introduce the new ideas of the Anthropocene, thus supplanting the ideas of the postmodern era. And the longer that people carry on living in the Holocene mentality, it seems that the more difficult it's going to be to create this change. So many people carry on enforcing the subjectivity of the postmodern era, while when it becomes possible to discuss things in a more objective way. While we can see the Security Council, which became the most important part of geopolitics during the Cold War, has gradually been pushed firmly into the background, governments want people to see the new face of the G8 and G20 summits as they have come forward, and the multipolar political environment which has appeared around them. This is really kind of in a similar way to the way that the nations of Europe appeared around the Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire in the Middle Ages. So yeah, just in a later period. So the Security Council itself is being something which is just seen to cope really now with the residual problem of the age, and we can see that it's kind of been pushed into the background, and now it's kind of becoming increasingly more of a problem as time goes by, because people are pointing their finger at the USA or Russia or China, but really it's because the nations on the Security Council still have the right to invade, kill or imprison whoever they want, and the effect this is having on other nations is going to keep us in the Holocene, for practical terms, even after the Anthropocene has been officially announced. So people can say that that's just the way things are happening, and maybe we don't ultimately even need to identify the introductions of new ideas as being in relation to any particular age, as new ideas can appear at any moment, and it's the way events are managed that matters. However, it's becoming more required of people now to understand what's happening, because progress is occurring in some areas, and these are leading others forward. And these are creating more laws covering discrimination and protecting other human rights, all the way down through the power hierarchy to the level really of the contact with the public. People are thus free largely to do what they please, but the fact that they need to obey these laws both as citizens and employees means that people will be looking for some sort of reward for doing this, and this is going to drive the world forward in terms of what people really want to know about society. So what I need to convey here is that the people who are engaging in the opportunities which are being created by the evolution of the world order are a bit naive if they don't know about the world order itself, as in many cases society lets people manage the general idea of what they're doing, so they're both free to succeed or fail. But as more accountability is being required and governments are realizing more, it's becoming seen as being irresponsible not to advise the public if they know about anything that might affect the outcome of their efforts or investments. So it's becoming the responsibility of governments to keep people informed, and I think this is ultimately why this change will come, because people can get ideas from the media, the arts, religion, philosophy, individual politicians, but they can't enforce them as changes in the law can. So as people are being required to take more of an interest in ideas, it should become clear how the development of new ideas relate to the point we're at in the age we're living in. In other words, people will gradually shift into the Anthropocene because they have to, because there's benefits to being there. In the way I see my job being governed, everyone has the opportunity to understand what's happening and why, because I see it as my social responsibility for having the information I gathered through writing the book, because that's the whole backstory really for understanding how the age that we're living in today has come into existence. How we're evolving beyond that in learning about ideas for ourselves and about creating a new direction for ourselves in a way that wasn't possible in previous ages. So I put a lot of the world's philosophers in the book because the way we need to understand why ideas were created in their time is essential if we want to see the whole ideas process. Knowing about all this is a way that we can shift to a more educated paradigm through learning, not have the shock of suddenly having to wake up to the way things are. For me, it was always a question of why the world works today like it does when we have the resources to create a great society. But if you look at the proportions in which the age we're living in has evolved out of the previous ones, then it makes sense why we have the problems we are now and the way that we're solving them. So finding out about all this actually can help people get more involved in the process. I mean, the whole idea of people having a sudden spiritual awakening which causes them to lose all their friends and not want to do their job is something which is becoming a bit of a famous phenomenon. And by learning about the history of it one bit at a time, we can prevent this from happening and teach the individual to shift gradually rather than awaken suddenly. Religions with grades have used this method for thousands of years, but still many people are unaware that it exists. The fact that all this information is available now means that we all have the opportunity really to move into the Anthropocene. I was actually writing a book on how new world orders evolved over time when I discovered the idea of the Anthropocene, and I realized that it was the events of history which created the world and led to a new period as they created a new world order. So then it's actually the official categorization of periods which is the answer to the whole world order question. In other words, the people that have created change for thousands of years have known about this principle, while the new world order conspiracy theorists rant and point their fingers in various directions, but none of them towards the truth of the matter which lies in the whole.